"Step aside, stupid! You'll dirty my suit!" Leonard Aranda landed a sharp kick on the pregnant woman. Lucy collapsed to her knees, shielding her belly. The white towels scattered across the marble floor. Leonard's friends laughed while recording on their phones. Lucy lifted her gaze, calm, tearless. She looked straight at Leonard. "My husband is already on his way." The phrase fell like a silent bomb. Something in her composure made Leonard feel uneasy for the first time. Dozens of hotel guests watched from a distance. Some muttered in outrage, but no one moved to help. Others discreetly raised their phones, already anticipating the millions of views that video would get on social media. Slowly, with a dignity that clashed brutally with the situation, Lucy stood up, picked up the towels one by one, and walked away unhurriedly. Her right hand never left her belly's protective hold, leaving behind a silence full of questions. What nobody knew was who the woman's husband really was, and the secret that would make the entire Aranda family tremble. If this story already touched your heart in the first minute, subscribe to the channel. Here you'll find stories that heal, inspire, and make you believe in human kindness again. 3 hours later, the video was everywhere. The Aranda family had built their empire over 40 years. Richard Aranda, Leonard's father, controlled a chain of luxury hotels, shopping centers, and real estate developments throughout Latin America. His fortune was estimated at $200 million, and his political influence reached the highest levels of government. Leonard had grown up in that world of absolute privilege. He had never worked a day in his life. His only responsibilities were to burn family money on sports cars, extravagant trips, and yacht parties. By 22, he had already been expelled from 3 universities for drug and violence scandals. His 19-year-old sister, Valentina, followed the same pattern. Both siblings viewed domestic employees, waiters, and company workers as inferior beings, disposable objects that existed only to serve them. Lucy Herrera had joined La Perla Dorada restaurant just 2 months earlier, when her previous job at a veterinary clinic no longer allowed her to stand for long hours. She needed the money. Her husband had had to be away for work, and she had to sustain the family until his return. She was a 25-year-old woman with nursing studies she'd abandoned for lack of funds. Her natural beauty needed no expensive makeup or designer dresses. She carried the quiet elegance of someone who has faced hardship without losing kindness. At 11 that night, when Lucy arrived at her small apartment, she found her phone flooded with messages. Friends, neighbors, even strangers had sent screenshots of the viral clip. Pregnant woman kicked by millionaire in luxury. Restaurant. Businessman's. Son assaut, pregnant woman. The arrogance of the rich has no limits. The video had reached 2 million views in just 3 hours. Comments multiplied by the thousands. Indignation, rage, calls for justice. Some users had identified Leonard Aranda and were beginning to spread information about the entire family. Lucy turned off her phone and sat on her bed. She caressed her belly tenderly, feeling the baby's small kicks. "Don't worry, my love," she whispered. "Everything will be all right." But in her heart she knew the storm was just beginning. Across town, in the Aranda mansion, Richard fielded call after call from image consultants, lawyers and business partners. The crisis spread like wildfire. Media outlets had already picked up the story. By morning it would be on every newscast in the country. Leonard, unaware of the disaster he had unleashed, slept soundly in his 500-square-meter suite. The sun had barely risen when Richard's phone began ringing nonstop. "Mr. Aranda, we need to speak urgently." It was the tense voice of Michael Santamaria, the company's director of public relations. Your son's video has 8 million views. It's trending worldwide on every platform. Richard sat up on his king-size bed, still unable to grasp the catastrophe. Through the penthouse windows, he could see the city he'd helped build with malls and high-rise apartments. What video are you talking about? Turn on the news, sir. Any channel. Remote in hand, Richard powered up the 75-inch TV. The first channel showed the video in slow motion, his son kicking a pregnant woman in the city's most exclusive restaurant. The second featured 3 commentators analyzing the case as a symbol of social inequality. The third showed spontaneous protests outside Aranda corporate offices. My God, Richard muttered. His phone wouldn't stop ringing, business partners canceling contracts, investors pulling funds, senior employees resigning over irreconcilable ethical differences. By 7 a.m., more than 20 administrative employees had resigned. Domestic staff didn't show up. Morning news shows led with the story, interviewing human rights experts and women's protection organizations. Leonard woke to his father's roar. "Leonard, get downstairs now." When he reached the study, he found his father pacing like a caged lion. The wall screens showed plummeting graphs. In just 6 hours, the company had lost 30% of its market value. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Richard thundered. 40 years of work, destroyed in one night. "Dad, it was just an annoying employee. People will forget in a week." Richard stepped up to his son and for the first time in 22 years shouted with all the air in his lungs, "That annoying employee is costing us $50 million. The door opened. Michael Santamaria entered with an older man in his 60s, impeccably dressed but without flashy brands. His presence commanded immediate respect. "Richard, this is Attorney Salvatierra," Michael said, nerves obvious. "He represents the assaulted woman." Salvatierra had that kind of look that seemed to read thoughts. His gray hair was neatly slicked back, and his gray eyes conveyed ruthless intelligence. "Mr. Aranda," he said, voice calm but firm, "I've come with a proposal that may save what's left of your reputation. How much do you want?" Richard asked bluntly. "This is not about money. My client isn't interested in financial compensation." Leonard snorted a laugh. "Then what? Public apologies, a charity with her name?" Salvatierra regarded him as one might a particularly unpleasant insect. "She wants real justice. Transformational justice." He opened his leather briefcase and drew out a folder. "Your son will serve as a volunteer at San Rafael Community Hospital for the next 2 months, specifically in the maternity ward, assisting low-income expectant mothers. No privileges, no excuses, no absences." "That's ridiculous!" Leonard shouted. "I'm not mopping floors or changing dirty sheets." "The alternative," Salvatierra continued unfazed, "is a lawsuit for assault, intentional injury, psychological damage, and social discrimination. Counsel estimates up to $120 million in damages, plus legal costs and reputational harm, which is already severe." Richard felt the air leave his lungs. "Additionally," Salvatierra added, "my client has set a non-negotiable condition. The community service ends only when her baby is born. Until then, your son must fulfill his duties at the hospital without fail." "And if I accept this, the case is closed?" Richard asked. "If your son shows genuine change and fully complies, my client will consider not proceeding." Leonard watched as if trapped in a nightmare. "Dad, you can't be serious." Richard stared at the screens, falling shares, street protests, canceled deals. "I accept," he said hoarsely. And for the first time in his life, Leonard Aranda would have to work. San Rafael Community Hospital smelled of disinfectant and human suffering. Leonard arrived on day one in his latest model BMW, parking in the doctor's area. Security guards approached immediately. "Sir, that space is for medical staff only." "I'm medical staff," Leonard lied, waving Salvatierra's letter accrediting him as a volunteer. "Volunteers park on the street," the guard replied flatly. First humiliation. Head nurse Martha Contreras, 50 years old with 3 decades of hospital experience, had seen hundreds of babies born, consoled mothers who lost theirs, worked 24-hour shifts. She had no patience for rich boys playing volunteer. "So you're the famous Leonard Aranda," she said, handing him a faded green uniform. "Here we don't have last names, only work." She assigned the most basic tasks: mopping floors, changing sheets, delivering meals to patients, emptying trash. On the first day, Leonard refused to clean a bathroom. "I'm not touching that," he said in disgust. "Then go home," Martha replied. "But be clear, if you don't comply here, tomorrow you'll be in court facing a multi-million-dollar suit." Leonard cleaned the bathroom, his hands used only to holding champagne flutes and sports car steering wheels, blistered from cleaning chemicals. His back ached from constant bending. His feet swelled after 8 hours on them. Other nurses treated him with cool professionalism. Doctors ignored him outright. Patients watched with curiosity, some recognizing him from the news. In week 1, Leonard tried to pull rank. "Do you know who I am?" he told a junior doctor who asked him to run samples to the lab. "Yes," the doctor replied. "You're the volunteer who's going to take these samples to the lab right now." It didn't work. In week 2, Leonard begged his father to end the farce. "Dad, this is inhuman. I'm working like a maid." "You're working like a normal person," Richard said. "And you'll keep at it until that woman's baby is born." Week 3, Leonard saw Lucy for the first time since the restaurant. She'd come for a routine prenatal check. She wore a simple maternity dress and comfortable shoes. Her hair was tied back in a plain ponytail, no ostentatious makeup, but she carried that natural beauty that needs no adornment. When their eyes met in the corridor, Lucy regarded him with a mixture of surprise and curiosity. There was no hatred in her gaze, which unsettled him deeply. "Mrs. Herrera," a nurse called. "This way, please." Leonard watched as she walked to the exam room, instinctively protecting her belly with her hands, the same belly he had endangered with his kick. For the first time, he felt something strange in his chest, an uncomfortable sensation he couldn't name. In the days that followed, he began paying attention to patients' stories. Maria, 16, pregnant and abandoned by her boyfriend. Carmen, with 4 children whose husband had emigrated to the U.S. Rosa, a single mother working 12-hour days as a housekeeper to cover prenatal costs. Women who fought with dignity, who fiercely protected their babies, who found strength in adversity. One afternoon, while he cleaned the nurse's break area, he found a new box of latex gloves on his makeshift desk. No note, but he knew instinctively who had left them. Lucy had noticed his hands cracking from the cleaning chemicals. That night, Leonard lay awake thinking about the gesture. No one in his life had ever shown that kind of consideration. His parents bought him cars, trips, cash, but no one had ever noticed his cracked hands. The next day, as he sorted charts, he saw Lucy in the waiting room, caressing her belly in slow circles, whispering words he couldn't hear from afar. Her face glowed with that special light pregnant women wear when they speak to the child inside. For the first time in his life, Leonard felt real guilt and wondered what kind of person he had been. The meeting was called in Richard's corner office on the 42nd floor of the city's tallest corporate tower. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view that made people feel they ruled the world. But Richard didn't feel powerful that afternoon. Salvatierra arrived with Lucy, who, 8 months pregnant, walked with the measured grace of late-term mothers. In a simple, elegant navy dress, she filled the office with a quiet dignity that contrasted with the ostentation around her. "Mr. Aranda," Salvatierra began, "it's time to reveal the whole truth." Richard frowned. "What truth? I thought this was only about the suit." "It concerns something much deeper," Salvatierra said, opening his briefcase. He laid out photographs and documents on the Italian marble table. The first showed a man around 45 in military uniform, same gray eyes as Richard, the same strong bone structure, but an expression of nobility Richard had lost decades ago. "Richard, meet your sister-in-law officially, Lucy Herrera de Aranda." Silence crashed over the room. "Lucy is married to your older brother, Matthew Aranda, the brother who cut ties with you 15 years ago over the way you treated employees and workers." Richard felt the floor shift. "Matthew," he murmured. "Matthew is dead. He died on that mission in Colombia." "Matthew is alive," Lucy said firmly. "He served on classified missions for 12 years. We couldn't contact family for national security reasons." Salvatierra slid more documents forward. "A year ago, Matthew retired with honors. He married Lucy 8 months ago. When they decided to reconnect with the family, he learned about the restaurant incident." Richard picked up a wedding photo, Matthew and Lucy surrounded by military colleagues at an intimate celebration. "Why didn't he contact me directly?" "He wanted to see what kind of people you had become," Lucy answered. "Matthew asked me to work at the restaurant for a few weeks to observe how the Arandas treated humble people." The revelation hit like a hammer. "It was all a test," Lucy continued. "Matthew wanted to know if reconciliation was possible." Richard collapsed into his executive chair. "And my son kicked you. Your son kicked his uncle's pregnant wife, his future cousin, the woman his uncle loves more than life." The door opened. A man Richard hadn't seen in 15 years but recognized instantly walked in. Matthew Aranda, 45, was in excellent shape. His military bearing showed in every movement, but his eyes held a wisdom and kindness Richard envied. "Hello, brother," Matthew said calmly. Richard rose slowly. The brothers studied one another for long seconds, seeing in the other's face the years and choices that had driven them apart. "Matthew, I thought you were dead." "To you I was. Since the day I watched you fire Maria, the housekeeper who served our parents for 20 years. Remember? You let her go without pension or severance when she got cancer." Richard closed his eyes. That memory had haunted him for years. "That was a mistake." "It showed who you were," Matthew replied. "That's why I left. Why I cut all contact." He stepped to Lucy's side and laid a protective hand on her belly. "When she told me what happened at the restaurant, my first impulse was to face your son like we face cowards who attack pregnant women." Richard swallowed. "But my wife convinced me to give him a chance, to see if there was anything redeemable in him." Matthew walked to the window, eyes on the city. "These weeks I've been monitoring Leonard at the hospital. Daily reports." "You've been watching him?" Richard asked. "I have contacts everywhere. I know he resisted at first, tried to use influence, complained and protested." He paused. "But I also know yesterday he helped a teen mother fill out hospital forms." I know 3 days ago he stayed late to clean after an emergency. I know he started treating nurses with respect. He turned back. My nephew is changing. The question is whether it's genuine or just an act to escape consequences. Lucy straightened with the careful grace of late pregnancy. That's why we want one last test, she said. In 2 weeks, our baby will be born. We want Leonard present for the birth, to see the life he endangered, to truly understand the magnitude of what he did. And after that, Matthew added, we'll decide whether any family reconciliation is possible. Richard looked at his older brother with a mix of admiration and shame. And if Leonard doesn't truly change? Matthew gathered the photos. Then I'll know the Aranda family has no redemption and will leave forever. When they left, Richard stood alone before the panoramic glass, staring at the city he'd built with money but without heart. For the first time in decades, he felt real fear of losing something he couldn't buy, the chance to get his brother back. Leonard's 6th week at the hospital began differently. He arrived earlier than the morning shift, his now calloused hands carefully laying out supplies. He no longer complained about the faded uniform or the disinfectant he had come to recognize as the smell of real life. An emergency arrived that morning, an 18-year-old in preterm labor. Her name was Andrea. She came alone, terrified, sobbing, with no money. I can't pay, she repeated between sobs. My boyfriend left when he found out. My family kicked me out. Dr. Ramirez, a 50-year-old known for his bad temper, approached impatiently. If you can't pay, go to the public hospital. We don't do charity here. From the hallway, Leonard watched. Something snapped inside him. He stepped forward. Dr. Ramirez, I'll cover Andrea's expenses. The doctor stared. You? A volunteer's going to pay a stranger's medical fees? Yes, Leonard said without hesitation. And if there's any issue, you can take it up with administration. It was the first time Leonard used his family influence to help someone else, not himself. Andrea looked at him through grateful tears. I don't know how to thank you. Don't thank me. Focus on bringing your baby safely into the world. He stayed through the labor, held her hand through the contractions, brought water when she was thirsty, spoke encouragement when fear threatened to consume her. When the baby, a healthy 6-pound, 3-ounce boy, was born, Leonard felt a new emotion. Seeing that little life he had helped protect filled him with a satisfaction deeper than any sports car or luxury trip. What will you name him? He asked. Andres, she said, after the angel who helped me when I needed it most. Leonard stepped into the corridor, eyes wet. Head nurse Martha Contreras, hard on him in the first weeks, met him there. You did something good today, kid, she said with a smile he hadn't seen before. That baby has a chance because of you. I only did what any decent person would. No, Leonard, not any person. In 30 years here, I've seen plenty with money who never lifted a finger to help anyone. That afternoon, as Leonard organized charts, Lucy arrived for her final check before delivery. Her belly was at its peak. She moved with the slow caution of late pregnancy. Passing his desk, she stopped. I heard what you did for Andrea, she said softly. Leonard looked up, bracing for sarcasm or distrust. Instead, he found something like approval. She needed help. Yes, and you gave it without expecting anything in return. Lucy stood beside the desk, caressing her belly in slow circles. I want you to know something, Leonard. I've been watching you these weeks. At first, I expected it to be an act. But I've seen how you treat patients. I've seen you stay late when emergencies hit. I've seen how you look at newborns as if for the first time you understand what life means. A knot formed in Leonard's throat. "Lucy, what I did to you that night? I can't forgive what you did," she cut in firmly. "That kick could have killed my baby. It could have killed me." Silence yawned between them like an abyss. "But I can trust what you're starting to do," she added. "And that matters more than forgiveness." She walked toward the exam room, leaving Leonard with words that would echo for days. 3 nights later, at 2 a.m., the emergency alarm sounded. Lucy had arrived in labor. Leonard was ending his overnight shift when he saw Matthew racing down the corridor carrying his wife in his arms. The ex-soldier's face showed a man who had faced enemy fire, but never anything as terrifying as his wife in pain. "Where's the doctor?" Matthew shouted. "She's bleeding." The on-call physician appeared at once with a team of nurses. Leonard watched from a distance, helpless, yet unable to leave. "It's a minor complication," the doctor explained after examination. "The baby's in the wrong position, but we can handle it. We need to prep for emergency surgery." For the next 2 hours, Matthew paced like a caged beast. His hands trembled, his only outward sign of inner terror. After an hour, Leonard approached. "Sir, uncle," he corrected himself. "May I sit with you?" Matthew looked surprised. "You don't have to." "I do. That woman and her baby, I once put them in danger. I need to stay until I know they're safe." The two men sat in hard plastic chairs. A silence stretched between them, 15 years of family distance and 6 weeks of transformation. "When you were a child," Matthew said suddenly, "you followed me everywhere." "You said you wanted to be a soldier like me?" Leonard smiled sadly. "I remember. Do you know why I truly left the family?" Leonard shook his head. "Because I saw what money was doing to all of you. I saw how your father treated employees like objects, how your mother spoke with contempt about the poor, how you and Valentina grew up believing you were superior to other human beings just for being born privileged." Matthew leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "In the military, I learned a person's worth isn't measured by what they have, but by what they're willing to sacrifice for others. As you sacrificed family ties for your principles, as you now sacrifice comfort to serve women you once considered beneath you." At that moment, the doctor returned, mask hanging from his neck. "Mr. Aranda, you have a healthy baby boy. Your wife is perfectly fine." Matthew collapsed into the chair, tension draining in a single breath. "Can I see them?" "Of course, room 304. On the way, Matthew stopped. "Leonard, I want you to meet your cousin." They entered the room where Lucy, exhausted yet radiant with the new mother's light, held a small bundle wrapped in blue. "Matthew," she whispered, "look how beautiful he is." Matthew kissed her forehead with a tenderness that pricked Leonard with envy. He'd never seen love so pure and protective. "What shall we name him?" Matthew asked. "Gabriel," Lucy said. "Like the archangel who protects families." Leonard lingered by the door, watching. That baby, now peacefully sleeping in his mother's arms, had once been in mortal danger because of him. That woman, glowing with maternal joy, had endured humiliation and terror because of his arrogance. "Leonard," Lucy called, "come closer." He approached as if walking on holy ground. "Do you want to hold him?" "I don't know if I should." "I want you to," she insisted. "I want you to feel the weight of the life you've helped protect these weeks." With trembling hands, Leonard took baby Gabriel. The child was so small, so fragile, so perfectly formed. Tiny fingers curled instinctively around Leonard's index finger. In that moment, something finally shattered inside the young Aranda. Arrogance, contempt, coldness, all crumbled like sandcastles. He began to cry. Not the manipulative tears of a rich boy denied his whims, but the deep, freeing tears of a man who finally understood the magnitude of his wrongs and the beauty of redemption. "I'm sorry," he whispered to the baby, to Lucy, to Matthew. "I'm so sorry." "We know," Matthew said, placing a hand on his nephew's shoulder. "And now that you truly feel it, we can start being a family again." Outside, dawn painted the sky gold, as if the world were celebrating Gabriel's birth and Leonard's rebirth. 5 years later, the Aranda family garden had changed completely. Where ostentatious marble statues once stood, fruit trees grew for neighborhood children to enjoy. Where perfectly manicured lawns once couldn't be stepped on, a playground now welcomed kids every afternoon. 27-year-old Leonard gently pushed a swing while his cousin Gabriel laughed with the pure joy of 5. The boy had the family's gray eyes, but his mother's kind smile. "Uncle Leo, tell me again about when you worked at the hospital," Gabriel asked, brimming with childlike curiosity. "Again? I've told you 1,000 times. But I like it, especially the part where you helped Andrea's baby." Leonard smiled. Andrea and her son Andres, now also 5, had become part of the extended family. Andres attended the private school the Arandas had turned into a scholarship institution for low-income kids. "All right, but then you help me make dinner." From the terrace, Lucy watched, stroking her belly, pregnant again, expecting a girl they would name Hope. This time, Leonard was the first to volunteer help throughout the pregnancy. Matthew came up behind her, wrapping his hands over hers. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "How strange life is. 5 years ago, I could never have imagined we'd have this beautiful family, or that my brother would become the man he is now." Richard Aranda had taken early retirement after his son's transformation. He no longer ruled the business empire with an iron fist. Instead, he established a foundation offering dignified work and health coverage to single mothers. He spent his days teaching Gabriel to fish at the small pond he'd had built in the garden. Valentina, the younger sister, had undergone her own change, now directing a shelter for vulnerable pregnant women inspired by her brother's example. "Dad, can I stay for dinner?" Leonard asked, arriving at the terrace hand in hand with Gabriel. "This is your home, son. Always." They both knew Leonard had his own apartment near the hospital where he worked as volunteer coordinator. He'd completed nursing studies and specialized in neonatal care, helping other privileged youths discover the value of service. As they cooked together, Gabriel chattered about his day at kindergarten. He had his mother's ease for making friends and his father's quiet resolve. "Uncle Leo, is it true you used to be bad?" he asked, in a child's blunt honesty. Leonard stopped chopping and crouched to eye level. "Yes, Gabriel, I used to be very bad. I hurt your mom when she was pregnant with you. But you're not bad now. I try to be good every day. Sometimes it's easy. Sometimes it's hard. But you help me remember why it's worth it," Gabriel pondered with sage seriousness. "Mom says people can change if they really want to. She says you changed because you learned to love." A lump rose in Leonard's throat. Even after 5 years, Gabriel's words could move him to tears. "Do you love me, Uncle Leo? More than my own life, Gabriel. That's why you're good now." Dinner flowed with laughter, work stories, weekend plans. Matthew told child-friendly versions of military tales. Lucy described progress at the shelter. Richard listened closely, speaking when he could add something useful. At bedtime, the whole family joined the ritual. Leonard read a story, Matthew hummed a military lullaby, Lucy kissed goodnight, and Richard promised a fishing trip the next day. "Good night, family," Gabriel whispered before closing his eyes. On the terrace, over coffee and conversation, Leonard gazed at the stars glittering over the city. 5 years earlier, he'd never noticed them, too busy staring at himself. "Know what's strangest?" he said to Matthew. "What?" "That I'm happier now, working at the hospital and living on my salary, than when I had limitless credit cards and sports cars. That's because you understand the difference between price and value." "What's the difference?" Matthew pointed toward the window where Gabriel slept peacefully. "Price is what you pay. Value is what you get. That child has no price, but his value is infinite." Leonard nodded, understanding, like forgiveness, like true love, like second chances. Later that night, Leonard drove slowly to his apartment. At a red light, he saw a young woman walking with difficulty, pregnant and lost. Without hesitation, he stepped out. "Excuse me, miss, do you need help?" She looked at him with initial distrust, but something in his eyes calmed her. "I'm looking for San Rafael Hospital. They told me they take emergencies even if you can't pay." "I work there. I can take you." "Really?" "Of course." "Please, get in." On the way, Leonard thought of all the times he'd passed people in need without seeing them. He thought of the night he kicked Lucy, and how that terrible act had triggered the most important transformation of his life. He thought of Gabriel sleeping peacefully, of Lucy expecting her second child, of Matthew, who had chosen redemption over revenge. He thought of Andrea and Andres, of the dozens of mothers he'd helped in 5 years, of the newborns he'd watched take their first breath. At the hospital, he helped the pregnant woman register and made sure she received immediate care. When he returned to his car, he found a note under the wiper. "Thank you for proving that angels still walk the earth. Mary Fernanda." Leonard tucked the note into his wallet beside the first photo ever taken of him holding newborn Gabriel. Before sleeping, he wrote in the journal he'd started after his transformation. "Dear future me, today Gabriel asked if I used to be bad. I told him the truth, but I also understood something. I wasn't truly evil, I was lost. I had confused privilege with superiority, power with strength, price with value. Now I know true strength is protecting the vulnerable. True wealth is the love you give and receive. True greatness is serving others. Tomorrow is another day to be better, to honor the second chance I was given, to prove people can change if they really want. Gabriel is right. I changed because I learned to love, and each day I love more. Good night, world. Thank you for teaching me it's never too late to be reborn." In the night's silence, somewhere in the city, a pregnant woman slept peacefully in a hospital bed, knowing she'd found help when she needed it most. In a house that had learned to become a home, a 5-year-old dreamed of redemption and second chances. And in the heart of a man who had discovered the value of humility, the certainty grew that some mistakes are paid with money, but others heal only through forgiveness and love. This story ends here, but your story of transformation may be just beginning. Have you experienced a forgiveness that changed your life? Do you know someone who found their best self after a great mistake? Have you witnessed how true love can transform even the most lost people? We all have moments when we can choose to be like the Leonard at the restaurant, or the Leonard at the hospital. Moments to choose between arrogance and humility, contempt and compassion, hurting and healing. If this story touched something deep in your heart, if it reminded you it's never too late to change, if it inspired you to show more kindness to those in difficult situations, share it with someone who needs this message. Subscribe to our channel for more stories that heal the soul and remind us of humanity's beauty. Each week, we bring true accounts of transformation, forgiveness, and second chances. And please tell us in the comments which country you're watching from. We love knowing these stories travel the world, uniting hearts and reminding us that no matter our language or culture, we all share the capacity to love, forgive, and grow. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how much money we have in the bank. What truly matters is how much love we carry in our hearts and how much good we're capable of doing in the world. Until the next story, may your day be full of blessings and chances to be your best self. With love and hope, your family of healing stories.
The storm outside roared like a monster, thunder rattling the windows of St. Mary's Private Hospital in New York. Inside the maternity ward, a young woman fought for her life. Her name was Sophia Turner, 27 years old, fragile yet brave, clutching the sheets as waves of pain tore through her body. Sweat soaked her hair, her lips trembled, and her breathing came in desperate gasps. "Push, Sophia, push. We can see the baby's head," the doctor urged, his gloves already drenched in crimson. Sophia screamed, her voice breaking through the sterile silence, and with one final desperate push, the first child slid into the world, crying loudly. A brief flicker of joy crossed her pale face. "My baby, my little one," she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. But the moment of relief shattered instantly. Blood poured out of her body in terrifying waves, soaking the white sheets, dripping onto the cold floor. The doctor's voice sharpened with panic. "She's hemorrhaging! Get more blood units in here now!" The nurses rushed, their hands shaking, pressing gauze, adjusting IVs, calling out numbers. The smell of blood mixed with disinfectant filled the room. Sophia's vision blurred, her body trembling as her strength drained away. Her heart screamed not for herself, but for the second child still inside her womb. Then the door creaked open. David Miller, her husband, walked in with a smirk. Not fear, not concern, but arrogance twisted his face. His expensive suit was untouched by rain, his eyes cold and distant. "Look at this mess," he scoffed, folding his arms as he watched the blood spread like a cruel painting. "And you expect me to believe those children are mine? Don't make me laugh, Sophia." The words sliced through her like knives. Tears blurred her eyes, not from pain of the body, but from pain of the heart. She reached a trembling hand toward him. "David, why would you say that? These are your children, ours." He chuckled bitterly, shaking his head. "You think I don't know? You think I haven't seen the way my father looks at you? Don't lie to me, Sophia. Those babies, they're probably his." The room fell into stunned silence. The nurses exchanged horrified glances, unable to believe what they were hearing. The doctor muttered, "She's losing too much blood," but David stood unmoved, his smirk widening. Sophia's chest heaved, her heart breaking into pieces. Even on the edge of death, her husband was laughing at her pain, accusing her of betraying him with his own father. Her lips quivered as she whispered, "David, you're wrong. Please, believe me." Her eyes rolled back for a moment as another wave of blood poured out. The monitors beeped frantically, red numbers flashing warnings. The second baby still had not arrived, and Sophia's life hung by a fragile thread. And in that instant, as her world collapsed and David's cruel laughter echoed in the room, the door burst open again, and a commanding voice thundered. But who had come, and what truth were they carrying in their hands? Before the stormy night in the hospital, before the cries of newborns and the cruel laughter of her husband, Sophia Turner lived a quiet and humble life. She had grown up in a small town in Ohio, raised by a single mother who worked 2 jobs just to put food on the table. Sophia never had luxury, never tasted the sweetness of wealth. What she did have was kindness, resilience, and a heart that longed for love. At 21, she left her hometown to study nursing in New York City. She wanted to help people, to be a light in their darkest hours. While her classmates dreamt of glamorous careers or wealthy husbands, Sophia found joy in caring for the sick, holding the hands of patients who had no one else. Her smile was gentle, her voice soft, and everyone around her admired the warmth she carried. It was during her internship at St. Mary's Hospital that she first met David Miller. He was tall, confident, and carried himself with the arrogance of someone born into privilege. His family owned one of the largest real estate empires in New York. To Sophia, He seemed untouchable, like a star in another sky. Yet one evening, when she stayed late after a long shift, he appeared with flowers and that dazzling smile. "Miss Turner, you work too hard," he teased. "You should let someone take care of you for a change." Sophia blushed, never imagining that someone like David would notice her. He pursued her relentlessly, showering her with attention, expensive dinners, and promises of forever. Against her mother's cautious warnings, Sophia fell deeply in love. She believed she had finally found the family she always dreamed of. Their wedding was like a fairy tale, held in a grand hall with crystal chandeliers and endless champagne. Sophia, in her simple yet elegant gown, walked down the aisle feeling like the luckiest woman alive. She whispered vows through tears, promising to stand by David in sickness and health, in wealth and in poverty. At that moment, she never doubted his love. But soon after the honeymoon glow faded, cracks began to show. David grew distant, distracted by late-night business meetings and unexplained absences. When Sophia told him she was pregnant, twins, no less, he forced a smile that never reached his eyes. The warmth she once knew vanished. He stopped coming home for dinner, stopped holding her hand, and started accusing her of things she could not comprehend. "Are you sure they're mine, Sophia?" he asked one night, his voice sharp as a blade. Her heart sank. She laughed nervously, thinking it was a cruel joke. But his eyes were dead serious. From that night on, the man she loved became a stranger. Sophia carried her pregnancy alone, her health weakening as months passed. Every ultrasound, every kick from her babies, she faced with a mixture of joy and fear. Deep inside, she prayed that David would come back to her, that he would see the truth. But instead, he slipped further away, lost in his suspicions and secrets. And as her due date approached, Sophia sensed that her battle would not only be against the dangers of childbirth, but also against the man who once promised to love her forever. What could have poisoned David's heart so deeply, turning love into suspicion and cruelty? The Miller family name was spoken with both admiration and envy across New York City. For decades, they had ruled the skyline with their towering glass buildings, luxury apartments, and sprawling real estate ventures. At the head of it all was Richard Miller, David's father, a man whose stern reputation commanded respect in boardrooms and charity galas alike. To outsiders, the Millers embodied the perfect American dream: wealth, power, and influence woven into every fiber of their lives. But behind the shimmering facade lay suffocating expectations, rigid traditions, and a ruthless hunger for control. David had grown up under the shadow of his father's success, never praised for his own efforts, always measured against impossible standards. "Someday all of this will be yours," Richard would say, pointing at the city skyline from their penthouse balcony, "but you must prove yourself worthy." Those words shaped David into a man desperate to please, desperate to be seen as strong. Yet no matter what he achieved, Richard remained distant, offering criticism instead of approval. David's heart hardened over the years, craving validation that never came. When he introduced Sophia to the family, the reaction was far from warm. Richard studied her with his calculating eyes, the way a businessman evaluates a risky investment. She was beautiful, yes, and kind, but she was also ordinary, a nurse from Ohio, without money, without connections. "You could have chosen anyone," Richard muttered to David after their first dinner together. "Why her?" David clenched his jaw but said nothing. He had loved Sophia then, fiercely, defiantly. Yet deep inside, his father's words planted seeds of doubt. Could a woman like Sophia truly belong in their world of glittering wealth and unspoken rules? The Miller family gatherings were an endless parade of status and appearances. Socialites in diamonds, businessmen boasting of profits, women whispering behind champagne glasses. Sophia felt out of place, like a guest who had wandered into the wrong party. She smiled politely, endured the sideways glances, and told herself that love would be enough to bridge the gap between her humble roots and David's empire. But love in the Miller household was often smothered by suspicion and pride. Rumors began to swirl, tiny whispers at first, then louder. A maid mentioned that Richard had been unusually kind to Sophia during one gala, offering her his arm when she tripped. A distant cousin joked that Sophia resembled a younger version of Richard's late wife. Those words, careless and cruel, reached David's ears like poison. "Do you see how people talk?" David snapped at Sophia one night, his face red with anger. "They think my father has feelings for you." Sophia's heart shattered. She had never looked at Richard as anything other than a father figure, the powerful man who intimidated her more than anyone. But David's insecurities, fueled by years of craving his father's approval, twisted those whispers into daggers. And so, the man who once swore to protect her began to doubt her, to see her as a threat instead of a partner. Sophia could feel the walls closing in, the crushing weight of a world she could never fully belong to. And as the Millers tightened their grip on appearances, David's love for her was slipping into something far more dangerous: resentment. Before suspicions, before betrayals, and before the cold stares at family dinners, there had been a time when Sophia and David's love felt pure, magical, and unbreakable. It was a chapter she often replayed in her mind when nights grew heavy, the kind of memory that kept her heart alive even as everything around her began to fall apart. It all started at St. Mary's Hospital. Sophia was working a late shift, exhausted after tending to patients for 12 straight hours. Her feet ached, her uniform smelled faintly of antiseptic, and her hair was tied up in a messy bun. She was scrubbing equipment in the quiet of the ward when David appeared, holding a bouquet of fresh roses. "Don't nurses ever sleep?" he teased, his smile lighting up the dim corridor. Sophia blinked in surprise. Men like David, polished, confident, surrounded by privilege, didn't usually notice women like her. Yet here he was, leaning casually against the wall, looking at her as if she were the only person in the world. That night, he walked her home. The city lights sparkled above them, and the air smelled faintly of rain. They talked for hours about her childhood in Ohio, his struggles living under his father's shadow, their shared dreams of building something meaningful. David listened intently, not as the heir to a fortune, but as a man genuinely curious about the woman beside him. From then on, their love blossomed quickly. David would surprise her at work with coffee, insisting she take breaks. He'd take her to Central Park, where they lay on the grass staring at the stars, whispering promises into the night. Sophia, who had grown up never expecting a fairy tale, felt like she was finally living one. When he introduced her to friends, he wrapped an arm protectively around her, proud to call her his. "She's the best thing that's ever happened to me," he declared more than once, and she believed every word. There were moments Sophia will never forget. The way he kissed her forehead before leaving for business trips, the way he held her close at night as if she was his anchor in a chaotic world. When he asked her to marry him, it wasn't at some glittering gala, but in the quiet corner of her tiny apartment. He knelt awkwardly, holding out a ring that sparkled against the dim kitchen light, and whispered, "Sophia, I can't imagine my life without you. Be my wife." Tears blurred her vision as she nodded, throwing her arms around him. That was the happiest night of her life. Their wedding day sealed the dream. Sophia walked down the aisle in a simple gown, clutching white lilies. David's eyes glistened as he took her hand, and for one beautiful moment, it felt like nothing could break them apart. But time has a way of testing love. What began as passion slowly warped under the pressure of wealth, pride, and poisonous whispers. Sophia often clung to those early memories, the roses, the laughter, the quiet promises, because deep down, she still longed for the man who once made her feel like the most cherished woman alive. But that man seemed to be slipping further and further away, replaced by someone colder than she ever thought possible. In a world that seemed determined to break her, Sophia Turner found one steady light: her best friend, Lily Parker. They had met years earlier during nursing school. Two young women with different dreams, but the same fierce determination to survive in a city that could swallow you whole. Lily was outspoken, bold, and unafraid to challenge anyone who dared to hurt the people she loved. While Sophia was gentle and quiet, Lily was fire. She had been there when David first swept Sophia off her feet, skeptical from the very beginning. "Be careful, Soph," she had warned with narrowed eyes. "Men like him, they're used to getting what they want, and when they're done, they move on." But Sophia, blinded by love, had smiled and shaken her head. "You don't know him like I do. He's different." At first, Lily wanted to believe her friend. She attended the wedding, dressed in pale blue, clapping as Sophia walked down the aisle radiant with joy. She cheered during the vows, trying to ignore the cold glances of the Miller family, who clearly looked down on Sophia's humble background. For Sophia's sake, Lily stayed silent, but as months passed, she began to notice changes. Sophia's cheerful phone calls grew shorter. Her laughter faded. When Lily visited the Grand Miller estate, she found her friend sitting alone on the balcony, eyes red from crying. "Tell me what's wrong," Lily demanded, gripping Sophia's hand. Sophia hesitated, then whispered, "He doesn't look at me the same anymore. He doesn't come home at night. Sometimes he accuses me of things I don't understand." Lily's heart burned with anger. She wanted to march inside, grab David by the collar, and demand answers. But looking at Sophia's fragile state, she swallowed her rage and instead pulled her into a tight embrace. "Then I'll be your shield. Whatever happens, you're not facing this alone." From that day on, Lily became Sophia's silent guardian. She drove her to doctor appointments when David was too busy. She stayed overnight during the difficult months of pregnancy, holding Sophia's hand through the endless nausea and fainting spells. She cooked meals when Sophia was too weak, whispered encouragement when Sophia felt like giving up, and wiped away tears when the weight of betrayal grew too heavy. Sophia often told her, "I don't know what I'd do without you," and Lily would smile, hiding the fury she felt toward David. One night, Sophia finally confessed the cruelest wound. "He thinks the babies aren't his. He thinks I betrayed him with his father." Her voice cracked as she spoke, the shame unbearable. Lily's eyes widened in shock, then blazed with righteous anger. "That man is out of his mind. You've given him nothing but love, and this is how he treats you?" "No, Soph, I won't let him destroy you." But Sophia shook her head weakly. "Don't hate him, Lily. I just want him back. I just want my family whole." Lily bit her tongue, because deep down she knew the truth. The man Sophia longed for was already gone. And if things continued this way, Lily feared she would one day lose not just her friend's heart, but her very life. For a brief moment, Sophia believed that news of the twins would heal the cracks in their marriage. She imagined David's eyes lighting up with joy, his arms wrapping around her, his heart swelling with pride at the thought of becoming a father. She wanted to believe that the man she once loved so deeply still existed somewhere beneath the cold mask he now wore. The evening she told him, she had prepared everything with care. She cooked his favorite dinner, set the table with candles, and even wore the blue dress he once said made her look like the sky. Her hands trembled with both excitement and fear as she waited for him to return. When David finally walked in, he looked tired, distracted, his phone glued to his hand. "What's all this?" he asked flatly, barely glancing at the food. Sophia swallowed her nerves, reached for his hand, and whispered, "David, we're going to be parents. And not just one baby, twins." For a moment, silence filled the room. She searched his face for joy, for surprise, for anything that resembled love. But instead of happiness, his lips curved into a bitter smile. He pulled his hand away. "Twins?" His voice dripped with disbelief. "How convenient." Her heart sank. "David, what do you mean?" He paced the room, running a hand through his hair. "You expect me to believe this? That suddenly, after everything you're carrying, not one but two children? My children? Or maybe—" His eyes darkened. "Maybe they belong to my father." The words cut deeper than any blade. Sophia staggered back, clutching her stomach protectively. "How could you say that? Richard has never. He would never." But David didn't listen. His mind was clouded with jealousy, insecurity, and the poisonous whispers he'd absorbed from the world around him. In his heart, the line between truth and suspicion had already blurred. From that night, he grew colder. He stopped asking about her health, stopped attending doctor visits, and left her to face the frightening risks of a twin pregnancy alone. When she fainted one morning from exhaustion, it was Lily who rushed her to the hospital. David arrived hours later, annoyed, not concerned. "Maybe you're overdramatic," he muttered, scrolling through his phone, while Sophia lay pale and weak in the hospital bed. The gentle husband who once kissed her forehead and whispered promises at night was gone, replaced by a stranger who looked at her with suspicion rather than love. Sophia's heart broke a little more each day, but she held on for the babies. She told herself, "When he sees them, when he holds them, he'll believe. He'll love us again." But deep down, fear gnawed at her soul. Because every time she looked into his eyes, she no longer saw the man who had once vowed to stand by her side. Instead, she saw a man drifting further into the shadows of doubt and betrayal. And though Sophia carried life within her, she could feel something else dying: her marriage. Sophia tried to ignore the creeping changes in David's behavior, convincing herself that his coldness came from stress, from pressure, from anything but betrayal. She clung to the hope that once the babies arrived, their family would heal. But reality had a way of tearing through her illusions. The first sign came late one night. David claimed he was working late at the office, but when Sophia called his secretary the next morning to check if he'd made it home safely, the woman hesitated. "He wasn't here last night," she admitted reluctantly. Sophia's hand shook as she set the phone down. She told herself maybe it was a misunderstanding, maybe he had stayed with a client. But in her heart, a storm began to brew. Then came the unfamiliar scent. David returned home in the early hours, his shirt wrinkled, his hair tousled. As he kissed her on the cheek, Sophia caught it, a faint trace of expensive perfume that wasn't hers. She froze, her stomach tightening, her mind screaming with questions she dared not ask. Days later, Lily noticed too. Soph, his jacket, look. She pointed to a lipstick stain near the collar, faint but undeniable. Sophia's face drained of color. She tried to laugh it off, claiming maybe it was from a careless waitress, but Lily's eyes hardened. "Stop making excuses for him, he's lying to you." Sophia wanted to believe otherwise, but the evidence piled up. His phone, once left casually on the counter, was now guarded like treasure. He turned the screen away when she walked by, silenced his calls, and sometimes stepped outside to answer in hushed tones. One evening, when she was folding laundry, his phone buzzed on the nightstand. Against her better judgment, she glanced at the screen. A message lit up. "I miss you already. Last night was unforgettable." Her heart dropped, her knees buckled, and the basket of clothes tumbled to the floor. When David walked in minutes later, she confronted him, her voice trembling. "Who is she?" His eyes narrowed. For a moment, guilt flickered across his face, but then he smirked. "You're paranoid, Sophia. Maybe it's the hormones. Don't embarrass yourself." She felt the sting of humiliation, tears burning behind her eyes. But as he brushed past her, the faint perfume returned, wrapping around her like a cruel confirmation. The final blow came when a neighbor, an older woman who lived across from their penthouse, pulled Sophia aside in the hallway. "Sweetheart," she whispered gently, "I've seen him, with another woman, tall, blonde, always wearing red heels. They come in late thinking no one notices." Sophia's chest tightened. The betrayal she had feared was no longer suspicion, it was fact. She returned to the apartment, sat on the edge of the bed, and cradled her swollen belly. Her babies kicked as if reminding her she was not alone. Her voice broke into the silence. "Why, David? Why would you throw us away?" But there was no answer, only the echo of his footsteps as he disappeared into another night. And though Sophia's heart shattered, she knew this was only the beginning of a much deeper betrayal. The truth could only stay hidden for so long. One rainy evening, Sophia's growing suspicions pushed her beyond silence. Her heart pounded as she left the apartment, clutching an umbrella against the cold wind. David had claimed he was attending a late business dinner, but something inside her whispered otherwise. With trembling steps, she followed the driver who often chauffeured David. The black luxury car turned not toward the downtown offices, but to a high-end hotel glowing in the night. Sophia's chest tightened. She told herself she was wrong, that she would see him alone, perhaps meeting clients. But as she entered the lobby, her world collapsed. There he was. David stood by the elevator, laughing softly, his arm wrapped around a tall blonde in a crimson dress. The woman leaned into him, whispering in his ear, her perfume strong enough to choke Sophia even from across the room. The sight was undeniable. Sophia gasped, covering her mouth as tears blurred her vision. For a second, she wanted to turn away, to run, but her feet betrayed her. She stepped forward, her voice trembling but sharp enough to pierce the air. "David?" He froze, eyes widening in shock before narrowing into something darker, anger. The blonde smirked, clearly unashamed, as if daring Sophia to challenge her. Sophia's voice cracked. "How could you? While I'm carrying your children, you stand here with her." The lobby fell silent. A few onlookers turned their heads, whispering. Instead of guilt, David's face hardened. He stepped forward, his words like venom. "Don't you dare make a scene, Sophia. Do you want everyone to think you're crazy?" Her heart pounded. "Crazy? I saw you. I followed you here because you've been lying to me. I'm your wife." But David only laughed coldly, the sound echoing through the marble hall. "Maybe you should ask yourself why I don't believe those kids are mine. Maybe if you weren't so close with my father, I wouldn't be here." The accusation sliced her soul. Gasps rippled through the lobby. The blonde's smirk widened, enjoying every ounce of Sophia's humiliation. Sophia's body shook, her hand instinctively resting on her swollen belly as tears streamed down her cheeks. "You think her voice cracked, "you think I betrayed you with your own father? How could you believe something so vile?" But David didn't soften. Instead, he pointed a finger at her as if she were the criminal. "Don't pretend to be innocent, Sophia. Everyone sees it, the way he looks at you. Maybe these twins are his, not mine." The words were daggers. Sophia swayed, nearly collapsing, until a kind hotel worker rushed forward to steady her. The pain in her chest was unbearable, not just from betrayal but from the sheer cruelty of being blamed for sins she never committed. David turned away, offering his arm to the blonde as if nothing had happened. "Go home, Sophia. Don't embarrass yourself further." Her tears blurred the glittering lights of the lobby as she whispered, "You've already destroyed me." And as David walked into the elevator with his mistress, Sophia realized she was not only losing her husband, she was losing the last fragments of the life she once believed in. The confrontation at the hotel left Sophia shattered, but the damage wasn't only emotional. The stress and heartbreak began to take a heavy toll on her fragile body. Pregnancy with twins was already considered high risk, and now the weight of betrayal pressed on her chest like a crushing stone. In the weeks that followed, her health spiraled. She woke in the mornings with dizzy spells so strong she had to grip the walls just to reach the bathroom. Her ankles swelled. Her heartbeat raced unpredictably, and sometimes her vision blurred until she could hardly see. Worst of all were the sharp cramps that came without warning, forcing her to clutch her stomach in terror. At her next doctor's appointment, the physician frowned as he read the charts. "Sophia, you need to be very careful. Your blood pressure is too high, and with twins you're at risk for preeclampsia. You must avoid stress." She forced a small smile, but her heart sank. How could she avoid stress when every night her husband came home later, his eyes colder, his phone buzzing with messages from another woman? Lily tried to step in, visiting daily, cooking healthy meals, helping with chores. She scolded Sophia gently. "You have to put yourself first now. Forget David. Focus on those babies." But Sophia's heart wouldn't let go so easily. She still longed for the man she once knew, the man who used to hold her when storms frightened her, the man who once whispered dreams of a family. Deep down she prayed each night, maybe when he sees them, he'll change. Maybe when he holds our children, he'll remember his love. One evening, the pain grew unbearable. Sophia collapsed in the kitchen, her hands trembling as the glass of water shattered beside her. Lily rushed her to the hospital, where doctors worked frantically to stabilize her. David arrived hours later, his face annoyed rather than worried. "Another scare?" he muttered, looking at her pale figure on the hospital bed. Sophia's lips quivered. "David, I could have lost them. I could have died." Instead of comfort, his eyes narrowed. "Or maybe this is all part of your act, trying to make me feel guilty so I'll forget what I know." Her heart sank deeper than ever. Even in her weakest moment, bleeding and frail, he still chose suspicion over love. The doctor pulled David aside. "If she doesn't reduce stress and rest properly, she may not survive childbirth. You need to support her." But David only nodded absently, his thoughts elsewhere, already planning his next escape with the blonde who had stolen his attention. That night, as Sophia lay alone, she placed her hands over her belly. The babies kicked gently, as if reminding her she wasn't fighting just for herself. Tears rolled down her cheeks. She whispered, "I'll protect you. No matter what it costs me, I'll bring you into this world." Her strength was dwindling, but her resolve grew stronger. She knew the road ahead would be filled with pain, perhaps even death. And yet, despite her suffering, she could not imagine that the cruelest storm was still waiting for her on the day she would give birth. The night Sophia went into labor, the city of New York was swallowed by a violent storm. Rain lashed against the hospital windows, thunder cracked like angry drums, and lightning split the sky into shards of white. Inside the sterile halls of St. Mary's private hospital, another storm raged. A storm inside Sophia's body, threatening both her life and the lives of her unborn twins. It began with sharp contractions that gripped her like claws, stealing her breath and forcing her to cry out in agony. Lily rushed to her side immediately, her hand steady as she whispered, "You're going to be okay, Soph. I'm right here." But Sophia's face was pale, her eyes filled with fear. She knew the warnings the doctors had given her. Her blood pressure, her fragile condition, the risks of carrying twins. Every contraction felt like her body was breaking apart. Nurses wheeled her swiftly into the delivery room, the monitors already screaming with each irregular heartbeat. The doctor barked orders, "Prep for emergency delivery. We need extra units of blood on standby." Sophia gripped Lily's hand until her knuckles turned white. Between gasps, she whispered, "Promise me, if anything happens, take care of them. Please." Tears filled Lily's eyes, but she nodded. "Don't you dare talk like that. You're going to meet them yourself." The first hours of labor were brutal. Sweat drenched Sophia's forehead, her screams echoing off the sterile walls. The storm outside battered the city as if the heavens themselves were weeping for her. Blood stained the sheets far too quickly, and panic began to spread among the medical staff. And then, just when she thought she couldn't bear another moment of pain, the door swung open. David strode in, his suit dry despite the storm outside, his expression cold, detached. Instead of rushing to her side, instead of offering the comfort of a husband, he stood at the foot of the bed with his arms crossed. Sophia's tear-filled eyes met his. "David, please, I need you." But his lips twisted into a cruel smile. "What a scene. You're bleeding, screaming, and yet I can't help but wonder, are these even my children?" The words crushed what little strength she had left. Nurses froze, glancing at one another in disbelief. Lily nearly exploded with fury, but Sophia's weak grip held her back. Her heart pounded as she fought for air. How can you say that? David, look at me. These are yours." But he only chuckled, shaking his head. "Maybe they're his, my father's. Isn't that what everyone whispers?" Another contraction ripped through her body, nearly tearing her apart. The monitors blared, nurses shouting about dropping vitals. Blood poured faster, staining the sheets a dark crimson. The storm outside howled, matching the chaos within. Sophia screamed as the doctor shouted, "We're losing her. We need to move faster." David leaned back against the wall, smirking as if he were watching a play. "If you're lying, Sophia, the truth will come out tonight." And just as she thought her world would collapse entirely, the door burst open again, and a commanding voice thundered through the room, and with it came the revelation that would shatter every lie. The delivery room became a battlefield between life and death. Alarms shrieked as Sophia's blood pressure plummeted, her body convulsing from the sheer loss of blood. Nurses pressed down with gauze, doctors shouted for more transfusions, and the metallic scent of blood filled the air. Sophia's lips trembled as she whispered, "Please, save them, my babies." Her strength was fading, her voice barely audible, yet her spirit clung fiercely to the lives of her unborn children. But instead of standing beside her, David leaned casually against the wall, his face twisted into a smirk that belonged more to an enemy than a husband. His laughter broke through the panic, cold and cruel, slicing through Sophia's pain like glass. "Look at this pathetic scene," he sneered, his voice dripping with venom. "A wife bleeding to death, fighting for children that aren't even mine. Maybe now the truth will spill out along with all that blood." Gasps spread across the room. A nurse froze mid-step, horrified by his words. Lily, standing at Sophia's side, clenched her fists until her nails dug into her palms. She wanted to scream at him, to slap the smirk from his face, but Sophia's weakening grip on her hand kept her rooted. Sophia's eyes filled with tears, her voice shaking as she begged, "David, why are you saying this? You're their father. You promised." David cut her off with a laugh that chilled the room. "Promised? Don't make me laugh. I've seen the way my father looks at you. I've heard the whispers. These twins, maybe they're his gift to you, not mine." The accusation hung in the air like poison. Sophia's chest heaved, her heart splitting between physical agony and emotional devastation. The monitors screamed louder, her pulse erratic, her body on the brink of collapse. The doctor barked orders. "We're losing her. Prepare for an emergency C-section. Now!" Nurses scrambled, rushing equipment, yet David remained unmoved, his cruel amusement echoing louder than the thunder outside. Lily finally snapped, her voice shaking with rage. "You monster, can't you see she's dying? This woman has given everything for you, and you stand here mocking her? What kind of man laughs at his wife's deathbed?" David's expression hardened, but his smirk never vanished. A man who refuses to be fooled. "If she dies tonight, at least I'll know the truth when the DNA results come out, and if they prove me right, she'll take her shame to the grave." Sophia sobbed, clutching her belly as another wave of pain tore through her. Her vision blurred, her body trembling uncontrollably. She looked at David one last time, searching for the man she once loved, the man who had once held her under the stars and promised forever. But all she saw was hatred, suspicion, and betrayal. The storm outside roared, lightning flashing through the hospital window. Sophia's eyes rolled back as she lost consciousness, her body limp against the blood-soaked sheets. The room erupted into chaos, doctors shouting for more oxygen, nurses rushing to save her and the unborn twins. And through it all, David laughed, a cruel, heartless sound that echoed over the beeping monitors and Sophia's fading heartbeat. But in the very next breath, that laughter would be silenced by a truth far greater than his lies. Just when the chaos seemed unbearable, the delivery room door slammed open with a force that silenced everyone. Standing in the doorway, drenched from the storm but radiating authority, was Richard Miller. The patriarch of the Miller Empire, David's father. His sharp eyes swept across the scene, taking in Sophia's pale, blood-soaked body, the frantic doctors, and his son leaning against the wall with a mocking smirk. In his hand, clutched tightly like a weapon, was a sealed envelope. His voice thundered above the storm, cold and commanding. "Enough!" Everyone froze. Even David straightened, his smug grin faltering as he recognized the fire in his father's eyes. Richard strode into the room, each step deliberate, his presence filling the space with gravity. He stopped beside Sophia's bed, his expression softening as he looked down at her fragile form. For the first time there was no calculation, no judgment, only concern. "Hold on, Sophia," he murmured, almost like a father to a daughter. "Don't you give up." Then his gaze snapped toward David, sharp as a blade. "You stand here laughing while your wife bleeds? Do you even understand what you're about to lose?" David's jaw tightened. "I'm not the fool here. Those children aren't mine. They could be yours, Father." The words echoed like a gunshot. The nurses gasped. Even the doctor paused for a split second before resuming his frantic work. But Richard did not flinch. Instead, he raised the envelope high. "You dare accuse me?" His voice was low, dangerous. "You've let jealousy rot your heart, but tonight, the truth ends all lies." With a swift motion, he tore open the envelope and unfolded the document inside. The paper trembled in his hands, not from weakness, but from the weight of the moment. His eyes scanned the lines, then he lifted his gaze to meet David's. "These results," he declared, holding up the DNA test, "prove beyond all doubt that the twins Sophia carries are yours, David. Not mine. Yours." The room fell into stunned silence. The only sounds were the storm raging outside and the steady beeping of the monitors. David's face drained of color. He staggered backward, his smirk shattered, his breath caught in his throat. That can't be." Richard stepped closer, his voice like steel. "You've accused your wife of the vilest betrayal. You've shamed her, abandoned her, and laughed at her suffering. And all for nothing. These children are your blood, your future. And you," his eyes narrowed, "you nearly destroyed them." Sophia stirred weakly, her eyes fluttering open for a brief moment. She saw Richard standing tall beside her, the paper in his hand, and whispered with the last of her strength, "I told you, David, they're ours." Her head fell back against the pillow, her body trembling as the doctors rushed to save her. David fell to his knees, his pride collapsing with him. Tears spilled down his face as the weight of his cruelty crashed upon him. He looked at his father, then at Sophia, broken and bleeding, and for the first time his voice cracked with despair. "Please, forgive me, I was wrong." But forgiveness would not come so easily. For though the truth had finally been revealed, the damage was already done, and Sophia's life still hung by a thread. The air inside the delivery room was thick with tension. Outside, the storm still roared, but it was nothing compared to the storm raging between father and son. Richard Miller stood tall, the DNA results still clutched in his hand, while David knelt on the blood-stained floor, his arrogance shattered. "You've embarrassed yourself," Richard thundered, his voice like a gavel striking judgment. "You've shamed this family, and worse, you've broken the heart of the woman who carried your children. What kind of man laughs while his wife bleeds?" David's eyes brimmed with tears, his voice cracking as he reached for his father. I thought," people said. "People?" Richard's eyes blazed. "You let gossip and whispers control you? You let envy twist your mind until you accused your own wife of the unthinkable? You thought she betrayed you with me, your own father?" His voice trembled, not with weakness but with fury. David's shoulders sagged under the weight of his father's words. I've spent my whole life in your shadow. Nothing I do is ever enough. When I saw how you treated her, how kind you were," he choked back a sob, "I thought maybe she was the reason you looked at me with disappointment." Richard's jaw tightened. For a moment, his face softened, but then his anger returned. "My disappointment was never because of her. It was because of you. You have every privilege, every opportunity, and instead of showing strength, you chose weakness. You chose suspicion. You chose betrayal." The words struck David harder than any blow. He clutched his head, shaking as tears dripped onto the floor. "I know, I see it now. I was blind. And while I doubted her, she was fighting for my children, for my legacy." He turned toward Sophia's pale body on the bed, tubes and wires surrounding her fragile frame. "God, what have I done?" Richard knelt down, forcing David to look him in the eye. His voice dropped to a low, cutting tone. "You still have a chance to be a man, but it begins with humility, with facing the truth, with begging her for forgiveness, not because she owes it to you, but because you don't deserve it." David's lips trembled. I'll do anything. Please, Father, tell me I can make this right." Richard rose again, towering over his son. His presence filled the room, commanding both fear and respect. "That's not for me to decide. It's for Sophia, and right now, the only thing that matters is whether she survives this night." A sudden cry from the monitors pulled their attention back to her. The doctor shouted, "We're losing her again. Prepare for the second baby. Move, now." Nurses rushed, the atmosphere electrified with urgency. David reached out desperately toward Sophia, his tears falling freely. "Stay with me. Please don't leave me. I was wrong. I was so wrong." But Sophia's eyes fluttered shut once more, her body trembling violently as the medical team fought to keep her alive. Richard's gaze hardened as he turned to his son. "If she dies tonight, David, her blood will stain your hands. And nothing, not money, not status, not excuses, will wash it away." And as the doctors prepared for the final push, the room braced for the outcome that would either save their family or destroy it forever. The delivery room erupted into controlled chaos as Sophia's body convulsed under the weight of labor. Her skin was ghostly pale, drenched in sweat, her lips trembling as if each breath might be her last. The monitors screamed with warning tones, red numbers flashing across the screen. "Her blood pressure is crashing," a nurse shouted. The doctor's voice was sharp. "We need to deliver these babies now, or we'll lose all three." Sophia, barely conscious, felt the world slipping away. She heard fragments of voices, felt hands pressing against her, and smelled the sharp sting of antiseptic and iron. Somewhere inside her fogged mind, she whispered to herself, "Hold on. For them. For my babies." With a final agonizing push, the first child entered the world. A shrill cry pierced the tension, echoing through the room like a miracle. The doctor lifted the baby briefly, a tiny girl with flailing arms, before handing her to a nurse. "Baby one is breathing. Keep her warm." Sophia managed a weak smile through her tears. "My daughter," she whispered, her voice breaking. But the ordeal was far from over. Her body convulsed again, blood pouring faster, staining the sheets a deep crimson. The doctor's face tightened. "We're not done. Baby 2 is still inside, and she's hemorrhaging badly. Move, people." David staggered forward, his arrogance stripped away, replaced by pure panic. He reached for Sophia's hand, tears streaming down his face. "Please, Soph, stay with me. I was wrong. I was blind. Don't leave me now." Sophia's eyelids fluttered, her lips forming faint words. "Promise. Promise you'll love them, even if." Her voice faded before she could finish. "No," David cried, shaking his head desperately. "Don't talk like that. I'll love them, I swear. Just stay alive, please." The second contraction ripped through her, forcing another push that nearly tore her apart. The room filled with shouts, nurses rushing blood bags, machines beeping wildly. Richard stood at the foot of the bed, his fists clenched, watching helplessly as his daughter-in-law fought for life. Finally, with a scream that echoed through the storm outside, the second baby arrived. Another cry broke through the chaos. A boy this time, strong and loud. The nurse lifted him briefly before rushing him to the incubator. "Baby 2 is breathing. Both are alive." Relief washed over the room. But it was fleeting. Sophia's body went limp, her eyes closing as blood continued to pool beneath her. The doctor shouted, "She's going into shock. We're losing her again." David collapsed to his knees beside the bed, clutching her hand as his tears drenched her skin. "Don't go, Sophia. Please, I'll do anything. I'll change. Just come back to me. Don't leave me to raise them without you. I can't. I can't lose you." Richard's voice trembled, though it remained firm. "Fight, Sophia. Fight for those children. Fight for yourself." The medical team worked frantically, pressing, stitching, transfusing. Minutes felt like hours, the storm outside hammering against the windows. Then, just when hope seemed to slip away, a faint beep sounded steady on the monitor. Sophia's chest rose with a fragile breath. Color slowly returned to her cheeks. The doctor exhaled with relief. "She's stabilizing. She's not out of danger yet, but she's holding on." David sobbed openly, pressing his forehead against her hand. The twins had entered the world alive, but Sophia's survival was still uncertain, and her forgiveness even more so. The storm outside was beginning to quiet, but inside the hospital, the storm within David Miller had only just begun. The cries of his newborn twins echoed through the delivery room, fragile, pure, undeniable proof of his bloodline. And beside them lay Sophia, pale and trembling, her body still fighting to hold on to life. Richard stood tall near the bed, the DNA test still in his hand. His voice was calm now, but the weight of his words cut deeper than any blade. "There it is, David. The truth you refused to see. These children are yours. She never betrayed you. It was your fear, your jealousy, your weakness that turned love into poison." David crumbled to the floor, his body shaking as sobs tore from his chest. He buried his face in his hands, shame swallowing him whole. "What have I done?" He whispered, his voice breaking. "I've destroyed her. I accused her of the unthinkable. I laughed while she was dying." Lily, who stood protectively at Sophia's side, glared at him with eyes burning with fury. "You don't get to cry now, David. She needed you, and you weren't there. You nearly killed her with your cruelty." Her words pierced him like arrows, but he didn't defend himself. He knew she was right. Every memory of his accusations, his mockery, and his nights with another woman came crashing back, each one another dagger of guilt. He crawled toward Sophia's bed, his hands trembling as he reached for her limp fingers. "Sophia, I don't deserve you. I don't deserve these children. But please, please don't leave me. I'll spend the rest of my life making this right if you'll just open your eyes." Sophia stirred faintly, her eyelids fluttering, but she did not answer. The machines beeped steadily, her fragile breaths the only sign she was still with them. Richard's voice broke the silence again, heavy with authority. "You were so desperate to be seen, David, so desperate to step out of my shadow, and yet instead of proving your strength, you revealed your weakness. A real man protects his family. A real man trusts you." His eyes hardened. "You nearly lost everything because of your pride." David bowed his head, unable to meet his father's gaze. "I know. And I'll never forgive myself. But will she? Can she?" He looked back at Sophia, his tears falling freely onto her hand. Lily crossed her arms, her voice sharp. "Forgiveness isn't something you can demand, David. It's something you earn if she even chooses to give it." The truth hung heavy in the room. For the first time, David saw himself clearly, not as the powerful heir, not as the husband in control, but as a broken man who had betrayed the one person who loved him unconditionally. The cries of the twins grew louder, as if demanding his attention. He turned, seeing them wrapped in soft blankets, innocent and untouched by the sins of their father. His chest heaved with fresh sobs. "I almost robbed them of their mother. I almost robbed myself of the chance to be their father." He pressed his forehead against Sophia's hand, his voice shaking with desperation. Please, God, don't take her from me. Don't let my punishment be her death. The hours that followed felt endless. Doctors worked tirelessly, and at last the monitors steadied. Sophia Turner was alive, but only barely. Her breaths came shallow, her skin remained ghostly pale, and her body trembled even in sleep. It would be days before anyone knew whether she was truly out of danger. Lily sat vigil by her side, gently wiping Sophia's damp forehead with a cloth, whispering prayers under her breath. The twins rested in the nursery, their tiny cries softened by the distance. Yet their presence was a reminder of what Sophia had fought so hard to protect. David stood in the corner, shoulders slumped, his eyes hollow with regret. Every fiber of his being wanted to rush to her, to beg her forgiveness the moment she awoke. But guilt shackled him in place. Each time he looked at her fragile body, he heard his own cruel laughter echoing back at him. Richard finally broke the heavy silence. His deep voice carried the weight of both judgment and sorrow. Look at her, David. Look at what your doubt and arrogance nearly cost. David lowered his head, tears dripping onto the cold hospital floor. I know, Father, I know. I was blinded by jealousy, poisoned by whispers. I doubted her, doubted the children, doubted everything. And now... His voice cracked. Now I don't deserve to be her husband. Richard's eyes, sharp as ever, didn't waver. He stepped closer, his words deliberate. You're right. You don't deserve her. Not after what you've done. But that doesn't mean you can't choose what kind of man you'll be from this day forward. David's chest heaved, his hands trembling. Tell me how. Tell me what to do. I'll do anything. Richard pointed toward Sophia's unconscious form. Then start by being the man she believed you were. The man who swore to protect her. No more lies, no more affairs, no more weakness. If she wakes up and chooses to forgive you, you'll spend the rest of your life proving you're worthy. And if she doesn't, his tone hardened like steel, you'll raise those children with respect to her memory, never letting them suffer for your sins. David's tears fell harder. He dropped to his knees, clutching his father's hand. I swear it. On my life, I swear. I'll never hurt her again. I'll never let her down. Richard pulled his hand away, his eyes still cold. Words mean nothing, David. Only actions matter now. Lily, listening, turned to David with fiery eyes. You think promises erase what you did? You left her alone in the darkest moments of her life. You laughed while she bled. Don't you dare ask for forgiveness unless you're willing to fight for it every single day. David nodded, his voice breaking. I will. I'll fight. I'll change. For a moment, silence returned, broken only by the storm dying down outside. Richard walked to the window, staring at the faint light of dawn breaking through the clouds. This family will not survive another betrayal, David. If you fail again, if you ever let suspicion or pride destroy what Sophia fought to protect, you'll answer to me. David swallowed hard, his body trembling under the weight of his father's words. He turned back to Sophia, whispering through his tears. Please wake up, Sophia. Give me one more chance to make this right. While Sophia lay in fragile recovery, another storm brewed outside the hospital walls. One that would strip David of the very illusions he had clung to. The woman he had once chosen over his wife, the mistress who whispered lies into his ear, was about to show her true colors. Her name was Vanessa, a blonde socialite with sharp heels and sharper ambition. She had been the poison in David's veins, feeding his doubts about Sophia, encouraging his suspicions, and wrapping him in false affection. Whenever he questioned Sophia's loyalty, Vanessa's velvet voice would drip with venom. Are you sure those babies are yours? Richard looks at her differently, doesn't he? Don't be blind, David. And blinded he had been. He showered Vanessa with gifts, jewelry, designer clothes, a penthouse apartment in her name. He gave her access to accounts Sophia never knew existed. Every dollar he spent was a betrayal of his vows, a theft from the family he should have been protecting. But when the truth surfaced in the hospital, the DNA results proving Sophia's innocence, Vanessa was nowhere to be found. For days, David tried calling her, desperate for comfort, for the distraction she once provided. Each call went unanswered, each message left in silence. Then came the final blow. His bank notified him of irregular transfers. Accounts he thought secure had been drained. The penthouse he bought for Vanessa was empty, the closets cleared out, the safe stripped bare. David drove there in a frenzy, rain streaking his windshield, his hands trembling on the wheel. When he arrived, the doorman gave him a look of pity. "She left, Mr. Miller, with another man, a businessman from Chicago." They were laughing as they carried out the last of the bags. David's stomach dropped. He stumbled into the penthouse, his voice echoing through the empty halls. The scent of her perfume lingered faintly, but her presence was gone. Drawers yawned open, jewelry boxes sat empty, and the echo of betrayal rang louder than his footsteps. He fell to his knees in the center of the room, clutching his head. No, she wouldn't. But the truth was undeniable. Vanessa had taken everything. His money, his pride, his illusions. In that hollow silence, memories of Sophia flooded his mind. Her gentle hands, her soft laughter, the way she smiled even when exhausted from work. And then he remembered his own cruelty. Mocking her, accusing her, abandoning her in her hour of need. He had traded a diamond for dust, a faithful wife for a snake in high heels. Tears blurred his vision as he whispered into the empty room, "I betrayed the only woman who ever loved me. For this." When he finally stumbled back to the hospital, he was a broken man. His suit was wrinkled, his hair disheveled, his eyes bloodshot from crying. Lily looked at him with disgust, Richard with cold disappointment. But David no longer tried to defend himself. "I lost everything," he confessed, his voice raw. "And I deserve it. But please, I can't lose her too." He turned toward Sophia's room, his heart pounding. He had lost his wealth, his mistress, and his pride. But the question remained, could he still win back the love of the woman he had nearly destroyed? The sterile hospital room was quiet, save for the rhythmic beeping of machines. Days had passed since the harrowing night of labor, and Sophia Turner had hovered between life and death. Nurses moved gently around her, checking vitals, adjusting IVs, whispering as though afraid their voices might disturb her fragile hold on life. Lily sat faithfully at her bedside, refusing to leave even for a moment. She held Sophia's hand, whispering stories of the twins, describing their tiny fingers and soft cries. "They're beautiful, Soph. They're waiting for you. You have to wake up and see them." Then one morning, as dawn light spilled across the room, Sophia's fingers twitched. Her eyelids fluttered, heavy but determined, until they opened just enough to reveal her weary eyes. Lily gasped, tears flooding instantly. "Sophia? Can you hear me?" Sophia's lips parted, her voice hoarse and fragile. "My babies." Relief and joy collided as Lily squeezed her hand. "They're safe, both of them, alive and strong. You did it, Soph." The news drew a faint smile across Sophia's pale face, but her exhaustion was overwhelming. Even so, her heart burned to hold her children, to see with her own eyes what she had nearly given her life for. Richard entered quietly, his stern face softening at the sight of her awake. "Welcome back, Sophia," he said gently. "You gave us all quite a scare." But standing behind him, broken and trembling, was David. His once proud posture was gone. His suit hung loose, his eyes swollen from sleepless nights. When he saw Sophia's eyes on him, he fell to his knees beside her bed. "Sophia?" His voice cracked like a child's. "I don't deserve to even speak your name. I betrayed you. I accused you of things so vile, so cruel. I laughed while you bled. And now?" He clasped her hand desperately, his tears wetting her skin. "Now I beg you, please forgive me." Sophia looked at him for a long moment, her chest rising weakly, her gaze steady despite her frailty. She remembered every wound, his cold eyes, his mocking laughter, his betrayal at the hotel. Her heart ached with the memory of his mistrust, yet it also remembered the man she once loved, the man who had asked her to be his wife under the glow of their tiny kitchen light. Her voice was faint, but each word cut through the silence. "You broke me, David. You broke everything I believed in. I fought for our children while you abandoned me." David sobbed, pressing his forehead against her hand. "I know. I've lost everything. Vanessa, the money, my pride. She betrayed me and left me with nothing. But it's nothing compared to what I did to you. Please don't take them from me too. Don't take you from me." Sophia's eyes filled with tears. She closed them briefly, inhaling shakily. Forgiveness was not easy. It would never erase the pain. But when she opened her eyes again, she saw her twins in her mind's eye, the future they deserved, the family she had longed for. "I don't forgive you yet," she whispered, "but I will give you a chance. Not for you, but for them. Prove you can be the father they deserve, and maybe one day, the man I married." David wept openly, clinging to her hand as though it were his lifeline. For the first time, Hope flickered in the ruins of their broken marriage. But whether that hope would bloom or wither depended on the choices he made next. The days following Sophia's awakening were filled with both relief and uncertainty. Though she had survived the harrowing birth, her body remained weak, and her heart carried wounds far deeper than any doctor could heal. Yet, within the quiet walls of her hospital room, hope began to flicker. Her twins, tiny miracles wrapped in soft blankets, were placed gently in her arms. For the first time, Sophia gazed upon both of them, tears streaming down her cheeks as she whispered, "You were worth every drop of blood. You are my everything." Richard stood by her side, his usually stern demeanor softened by pride. He gazed at his grandchildren as though they were treasures beyond his vast fortune. "They're strong," he said quietly, "just like their mother." His hand rested briefly on Sophia's shoulder, a silent gesture of respect. He had always judged quickly, but now he saw her as the anchor of the Miller legacy, the one who had endured more than anyone else. Meanwhile, David lingered in the background, his once confident figure now marked by humility. Every time he approached Sophia, guilt weighed him down. He changed diapers, fetched warm bottles, and stayed up at night, rocking the twins when they cried. He did everything without complaint, desperate to prove that he was no longer the selfish man who had nearly destroyed them. Yet, Sophia's eyes often carried hesitation. She allowed him near, but the barrier between them remained. Trust, once broken, is not so easily repaired. One evening, Richard called David into the corridor. His voice was low but commanding. "You've been given a second chance, David. Few men get that. Do not waste it." David nodded, his voice hoarse. "I know, Father. I've lost everything else. All I have now is them, and I'll spend the rest of my life proving I'm worthy." Richard studied him for a long moment before responding. "Sophia deserves more than words. She deserves actions. Show her that you can be the man she needs, the father your children deserve. Fail again, and you won't just lose her. You'll lose me." The weight of his father's ultimatum pressed heavily on David's chest, but it also lit a fire in him. From that day on, he devoted himself entirely to Sophia and the twins. He learned the small details, how to warm a bottle to the right temperature, how to gently soothe their cries, how to let Sophia rest while he took the night shifts. Lily remained cautious, watching every move he made. Her protective gaze reminded David that forgiveness was still on trial. But she couldn't deny the change in him. The way his tears fell when he thought no one was looking. The way his hands trembled with fear whenever Sophia coughed or winced. Sophia herself remained guarded, but as she watched David cradle their son, his eyes filled with love and sorrow. A piece of her heart softened. Healing would be slow, but perhaps not impossible. And as dawn broke one quiet morning, Sophia realized the family she once thought shattered might still be rebuilt, if David could prove his redemption was real. Weeks passed, and the storm that once tore Sophia's life apart began to settle into something quieter, gentler. The twins grew stronger each day, their cries filling the house with new life. Sophia, though still recovering, found strength in motherhood. Each time she looked at her children, she was reminded of why she had fought so hard to survive. David remained by her side, no longer the arrogant man who once doubted her, but a humbled husband learning what love truly meant. He bathed the twins, sang lullabies in a trembling voice, and woke at all hours to comfort them. For the first time, his hands, once used to sign business deals and stroke another woman's hair, were devoted entirely to the family he had nearly lost. Sophia watched him with cautious eyes. Forgiveness did not come easily. She remembered his cruelty, his laughter as she bled, his accusations that cut deeper than any wound. But she also saw the man on his knees now, broken and desperate, rebuilding himself piece by piece. Her heart warred between pain and the faint stirrings of the love that once bound them. Richard visited often, holding his grandchildren with unexpected tenderness. His stern gaze lingered on David, a silent reminder of the ultimatum he had given. Yet beneath the steel, there was pride. Richard had seen the worst in his son, but he was also witnessing change, real change. One evening, as the family gathered in the living room, David finally spoke. He knelt before Sophia, his hands trembling as he took hers. "Sophia, I don't deserve your love. I may never earn back the trust I destroyed, but I want to spend the rest of my life trying. Not for me, for you, for them. His voice cracked as he glanced at the twins, cooing softly in their crib. Please, give me a chance to be the man you and our children need. Tears welled in Sophia's eyes. The memory of her suffering burned within her, yet as she looked into his eyes, she saw sincerity. She saw not the cruel man who had betrayed her, but the broken one who had learned through loss what truly mattered. Her voice was soft but steady. I can't erase the pain, David. I won't forget. But I will forgive. Not because you deserve it, but because our children deserve a whole family. And because holding on to anger will only destroy what little strength I have left. David broke down, sobbing as he pressed her hands to his lips. Relief and gratitude shook his entire body. Richard, watching silently, allowed the faintest smile to touch his face. For once, the Miller family was united, not by wealth, but by love hard-won through suffering. As dawn painted the sky with golden light, Sophia sat with her twins in her arms, David at her side, and Richard standing proudly behind them. The family that had nearly been destroyed now stood on the path of healing. Sophia whispered to her babies, her voice filled with hope. We survived the storm. And now, my loves, we begin again. And with that, the story closed not with tragedy, but with redemption, forgiveness, and the promise of a brighter tomorrow. So that's it, my wonderful friends. The story has reached its end, and if you are still here with me right now, it must mean something in this journey touched your heart in its own way. What we saw through Sophia's suffering and David's downfall is a reminder that trust, love, and forgiveness are fragile but powerful. The Stoics said, the obstacle is the way. Sometimes pain and betrayal become the very lessons that guide us toward healing and strength. Like Marcus Aurelius reminded us, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Sophia chose not to let bitterness destroy her. She chose love and a new beginning. And maybe that's what life asks from all of us. To rise again after storms, to rebuild instead of staying broken. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe, because together we can keep spreading stories that heal.